Hello guys, welcome back to our class series, and today we'll be talking about visual principles and graphic design. And this is again Education Technology Introduction, SPPP 1042 or SHPPP 1042, and this is Hassan Mahmoud Abu Hasna speaking. I hope you enjoy this class and stay tuned. Thank you. In this class, we are going to cover a variety of topics regarding graphics. We are going to start with definitions of graphics, importance of graphics in education, visual literacy, definitions of visual literacy, functions of graphics in education, guides on using graphics, what type of graphics, categories of visuals, visual design guidelines, and finally with the conclusion. Alright, so visual principles and graphic design. Actually, graphics has been used a long time ago as an educational tool when it started, the use of illustrations, books, illustrations, and written illustration books as a tool to, teach kid. For example, as we can see here in these two covers, these are actually covers of some books that has been written and used as an educational tool for kids, and this is according to Slide 1970. And there is actually a wide variety of graphics that is very common in today's teaching strategies that you find in almost every educational or school, university, any organization, educational organizations that you can find, which are graphics, maps, cartoons, and so on. As we can see here, there's actually some examples of the graphics that is actually being used in as a teaching strategy, and we will be talking about all graphic types later on in this slide. And actually, graphics plays a very important role in education. Once we integrate graphics and visual presentation inside our textbooks, actually this help our student to understand very quickly and get the idea without struggling, and to help us as a teacher achieve our goals during the teaching and learning process. And as we can see here in some of the pictures, these actually from real life situations that using graphics and presentations inside the classroom. So what do we actually mean by graphics? Graphics is any image or visual that represents something. Represent, for example, an object or whatever it is. So we usually use graphics to show the students some objects, so it makes the student understand and see this real object in real life. Graphics are often contrasted with text, which is comprised of characters such as numbers, letters, rather than images. So the real importance of graphics is actually to represent an object and make it clear and easy to see this object for the student inside our classroom. Alright, so what actually do we mean by visual literacy? According to Wellman 1993, visual literacy is the ability to read, interpret, and understand information presented in pictorial or graphic images. As we can see here in this graphic, for example, this is like a train track. The ability to read all these lines, numbers, and so on in this graphic is actually called visual literacy. And the other definition for Hinich, Molinda, Russell, and Smaldino 1990 is the learned ability to interpret visual messages accurately and to create such messages. So getting the meaning behind any graphic is actually and the ability to understand what is the idea or what is the message behind this image or graphic is called visual literacy. Yeah. So visual literacy could be one of two, whether decoding or encoding. Decoding is actually very simple meaning, which is the ability for us to analyze the visual once we see it. So if you're able to analyze any visual you see, this is actually called decoding. While on the other hand, encoding means the ability for the visual itself to express the meaning. All right, so there's no need for you to analyze anything, since the visual will be clear. So whether it's decoding and encoding, and this is actually the definition of visual literacy. All right, so what are actually the functions of graphics in education? According to Levy and Lenz, 1984, there are actually 4 functions for graphics, which are attentional, affective, cognitive, and compensatory. All right, so attentional, from the word itself, whatever pictures, graphics that attract attention and make the student remember for a long time. And affective, which will enhance the whole process of memorizing and understanding the meaning behind this message. And then the cognitive, which actually using the pictures to increase comprehension and retention, for example, providing elaboration for a text explanation and so on. And then finally, compensatory. There are some people that cannot read, so using pictures to show to show them. All right, so using picture to show them the message would help a lot in instead of giving them a text to read or whatever it is. So what is actually the purpose of using visuals? According to Smaldino, 2012, there's actually a certain purposes of using graphics, which are provide a concrete to represent the concept in text in a format of iconic, and then reference for ideas, which actually by using visuals to support abstract concept. All right, and then motivate learners, which actually make them more engaged inside the class, and then direct attention by using visuals, pointers to attract student attention. All right, and then repeat information by using visuals to support the text, and then reduce learning efforts. By using visuals, we can reduce students' effort in understanding the concept easily. And then finally, recall prior learning. By using picture, we can actually activate prior knowledge that the student already have. By showing them the pictures, maybe they will recall some prior knowledge that they already have before. And then at the same time, there is actually some consideration that we need to consider before we use any graphics. All right, so we need to make sure it's relevant, related to our objective to achieve. We need to provide some pictures that is actually related to the idea or the lesson that we are actually teaching. And then we need to make sure it's actually realism, which means it's realistic pictures, not only maybe some illustration and so on. And then we need to make sure it's the picture that we use, it's as simple as we could. Unless we don't have any picture that is simple enough, then we can go to use some complex picture, which is should be added only where absolutely required. And then for the size, actually when you use large pictures, actually more it will be more attractive for the student to actually remember. While on the other hand, when you give them or show them some pictures without any quality, it will not be even clear for them to see. And then finally, we need to consider the culture factors that to avoid any offense to any culture inside our classroom. So why do we even need to use graphics inside our classroom? It's not a purpose of itself. We don't need to use graphics to impress the student. We need to teach them. So using graphics is a tool inside our classroom, and using graphics are very important in some situation to show the students some real objects or some real situations. So using graphics needs to be for a purpose, actually, not only to impress our students. All right, and there is actually two types of graphics, very common types, which are the 2D graphics and the 3D, two-dimensional and three-dimensional. And let's go and see each one and its types. First type, which is the two-dimensional graphics, and this type of graphics is usually computer-based generation of, for example, digital images, and it's mostly from two-dimensional models such as 2D geometric models, text, and so on. And then we have also 2D dimensional graphics, which are originally developed upon traditional printing and drawing technologies, such as, for example, advertising, drawing, and so on, using softwares in the computers like Photoshop and so on. And then we have the 3D dimensional graphics, which actually the creation of the 3D graphics can be divided into three phases, as we can see here in the picture. First, we define the shape, which is called the modeling, and then if we need to add some motions, this is phase number 2, which is the animation of the object or the graphic that we have, and then finally rendering the final image of the objects. As an example, the 3D animation cartoon films, it all went into these three phases, which actually the drawing, and then animation, and then finally rendering the final product. Alright, let's move on to talk about categories of visuals. We have a lot of visual categories. For example, here representational graphics, which actually represent something. For example, in this picture, as we can see, the human heart. And then the analogical graphics, which actually shows something in real life. It's not the real thing, but it shows how it works. For example, the electricity circle, and this is actually not the real object of the electricity circle. It only shows how it works. And then we have attentional expressive graphics. For example, some graphics that we use to stimulate or give a cue to the learner. And then we have the realistic, which is actually a real object or real picture for a real object. And then we have relational, which shows us the communicate quantitative relationships between some objects, for example, bar, pie chart, and etc. And then the transformational, which actually illustrates movement or change in time and space. And then we have interpretive, which actually illustrate theoretical or abstract relationship. For example, food pyramids, the learning cone, as we mentioned in our last class, and so on. There's actually a lot of visual categories that you can study. Alright, so let's see some examples of different types of graphics. There's actually a wide variety of examples of graphics. For example, here, as we can see in the picture, this is called line drawing, which is a simple presentation of forms or objects by means of lines. Only lines used, no colors, no solid colors or anything. It's only line drawing. And then we have illustrated drawing, which is very similar to the line drawing, while we have used some solid colors and so on. So it's a simple and attractive artwork that helps simplify the concept or make it easy to understand. And then we have the croquis, which is a simple drawing, uses symbols, directions, keys and icons. For example, the train guidelines. And then we have the sequenced drawing, which is actually a group of pictures that tells a story or a phenomena with titles and captions. And then we have the comparative drawing, which is actually a complex pictures that tells some similarities and differences between the two objects. And then we have a cartoon, which is a very simple comic drawing that has been designed to tell a story or evoke emotions, consist of one or more frames with captions. And then we have the caricature, which is actually a simple lined humorous or drawing that simplifies a person or event or whatever it is. So we have maps, which is actually a simplified lines and illustrations that guides for a location and so on. And then we have posters. The poster is a graphic advertisement, aims to post specific message quickly and simply public place. And then we have the charts, which is actually a visual representation of data, for example, using lines, bars, and pies and so on. And then we have the flow charts, which is actually a diagram consisting of a set of specified symbols, for example, diamonds, circle, rectangles, and so on. And then we have the hierarchical diagrams, which is actually a way to organize or categorize data or people or things, using levels of organizations. And then we have the geometrical figures, which is actually a 2 or 3 dimensional drawing illustrations that illustrate a geometrical concept or relationship. All right. And then we have the screenshots, which is actually an image that it has been captured by the computer or the smartphone to show the item or a message or whatever it is. And then we have photographs, which is actually a visual representation for real objectives. All right, you as a graphic designer or someone that uses graphics in your work, you need to use some guidelines. For example, the arrangement, which actually decide which elements to include in your visuals. You need to be careful. And then you need to consider the balance, which actually a psychological sense of equilibrium or balance. You need to consider the colors, for example, and so on. We will talk about the balance later on. And then we have to make sure the contrast is actually clear, and then, for example, the size or type of fonts and the colors and so on. And then we have to make sure it actually holds the user attention, and they consider the colors. And then finally, you need to make sure that the graphic actually accommodates students with a variety of learning level, including disabilities and special talents. So these actually are the principles of using arts or graphics. We need to consider the balance, contrast, movement, and rhythm, and we will talk about each one of these guidelines later on this presentation. So actually, you as a graphic designer or the one that uses graphic inside your classroom, you need to make sure the balance is okay, the color is actually clear and balanced, and then the graphic hold the student attention. You are using the correct size, font, contrast, and so on. Let's talk about balance now. We have 3 types of balance, which are the formal balance, informal balance, and then imbalance it all. And then we will talk about each one of these one by one. As we can see here, this is an example for formal balance. Formal balance actually means when the balance are almost equal or very similar. As we can see here, it's the same picture, and it's the same colors, the same objects, so it's actually the formal balance, almost the same. Formal balance is the easiest type of balance to recognize and to create. All right, so informal balance actually is a symmetric which involves a balance of unlike objects. All right, so informal balance creates casual effects. So sometimes using informal balance will be more effective than using actually formal balance. Right. And then regarding the color, we need to make sure actually we are using the correct contrast. What do we mean by contrast is we are actually using the effective way of showing our message. For example, if you can see here, using the black font on a pink background, it will be very effective, while on the other hand green on red is not very effective. And let's see some more examples of the contrast. And here in this table you can find actually very effective combination of background and images for example PowerPoint slides and computer screens. Let's take one example. All right, so for example the background a light yellow, the foreground images and text will be for example brown or violet, the highlights will be red. It will be very effective to use. This is actually an example of balance. As you can see here in this advertisement, the colors used are very limited: purple, orange and white. And if you can see the upper half of the picture, the background is orange while the font is purple and white. The bottom half of the picture, the background is purple and for example the cup is white and the font is white and orange. So there is actually a very good balance in this picture. All right, as a conclusion for this class, visuals and graphics are actually very effective elements in teaching and learning, and this is actually according to the literature. So in order for us as teachers to use visual, we need to have some skills, we need to be trained, and we need to consider some guidelines as we mentioned in this class, and therefore guidance in the area of visual literacy for instructors is warranted. We need to make sure that we actually understand how to use it, how to use graphics, when to use it, and then we need to follow the guidelines, and then we need to follow the guidelines of using actually graphics inside of our classroom. And all this because we want to make sure actually these graphics are there to help us as teachers to achieve our objectives. And as we mentioned, using picture itself is not a way to impress our students. Actually, we want to teach them, we want to give them some solid knowledge and information. So that's why we are using graphics as a tool in our teaching and learning process. So all right, so that's all for today's class. I hope everything was clear, and we'll see you guys next week, and we will discuss about graphics furthermore. Till then, take care and bye bye.